The Otaki Promotions Group. I'm very pleased that we've got a good crowd here. I expect maybe a few more coming as well. I'm very pleased also that we have a couple of esteemed speakers here. Fran Wild, of course, most of you will know, and Guru Nathan, our local Paraparumu Ward Councillor. A few housekeeping things. Firstly, we've got toilets out here. If there happens to be a fire or if somebody self-immolates or something like that, then out the doors here and down the stairs here. I think there is also an exit down that way, so if you could keep an eye on that. The order of proceedings this evening is that we're going to have 15 or so minutes from each of Guru and Fran. Guru is going to go first this evening, and then we'll open the floor to questions. If you could just please be respectful with your questions. I know that there's people who are very passionate about the issues around amalgamation, and I'm going to put a time limit of a maximum of 2 minutes on those questions. So keep them brief, please. The briefer the questions, the longer the answers, hopefully. And I'm sure both of these speakers will give you some information that hopefully you will be able to take away. And if you haven't made up your mind already about the amalgamation issues, then they may be able to give you the information that will help you make up your mind. The Local Government Commission has a deadline of March the 2nd for submissions. You can go to the lgc.govt.nz website for information, and you'll find everything you need there. Now, a couple of, I'll introduce firstly, I guess, Fran Wild. Most of you, as I said, do know Fran. She was a Labor MP for Wellington Central when I first knew Fran. In fact, we were neighbours at Thorndon for a while. And she was a Minister of Tourism, Foreign Affairs and Trade, and one or two other things, I'm sure. Well known, of course, for the Homosexual Law Reform Bill and Adoption Reform Bills, and, of course, Wellington Mayor for some time. So, eminently qualified in the local government field and central government. Guru Nathan, of course, is the Paraparumu Ward Councillor and has been a journalist for 30-odd years. I noticed in some of his profile information for the last elections, no, I won't give my glasses, they're gone, that he is concerned about genuine consultation and restoration of public confidence in local democracy. So I guess that's where he's coming from tonight. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Guru.
Te mauriora, nga iwi, nga mana, nga rio, tēnā ra koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Shagudri le, in the New Zealand Matarat Makal, Kablikos Makal, Varga and Dalekri. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start perhaps with the big picture. Global urbanization. China in 10 years' time will have 15 new cities with a population of more than 25 million each. 225 cities of populations of 1 million and above.
It's hard to hear up the back.
They are also popping up in India and parts of Africa. This is a global web of supercities. The key word, is that better? Oh, when I say the key word, it became better. And so the key word is agglomeration. I would like to ask you all to repeat it, but I won't. Agglomeration, which is the concentrated cluster of industries and services, high digital interconnection, high income, and a population growth attracted by such high incomes and top-class urban amenities. A constant feature, of course, in these supercities is the spiraling prices of office and housing real estate. In many cases, these are city-states, like London, where the growth is 72% higher than the rest of the UK. Two other points about supercities. One, these supercities have more in common with the global web of supercities than their own hinterlands, their national hinterlands. 2, these supercities are the home and playground of the mind-bogglingly super-rich elites. The gap between the super elites and the rest is growing exponentially. So global urbanization is a fact. And if it is a fact, how does New Zealand fit into this global challenge? Auckland's population, for instance, 1.5 billion, one-third of New Zealand's population. Realistically and strategically, New Zealand can only have one supercity, and that's already Auckland. The forces of agglomeration have made Auckland into what they call primal cities. That is, the resources invested in it have reached a critical level, to a level where they become like black holes that suck the human and financial resources of the country. This first sign of city-state status has been reached in Auckland. You know why? Recently, they appointed their own ambassador to London. The mantra is, what's good for Auckland is good for New Zealand. And there are economic reasons for this. Genuine, legitimate economic reasons for it. Ladies and gentlemen, let me give you the small picture. The good, the bad, the ugly of global urbanization is a fact. And we have locked Auckland into that matrix. How does the Wellington region, with a population of less than 500,000, stem the pool of the black hole of Auckland supercity and its links to the global web of supercities? Is the political amalgamation of 9 councils into one the best way to accelerate the forces of agglomeration? Is there room in this mad rush to link up to the global web of supercities for us to, as the Maori says, taihoa, to ask the philosophical question, do we want or need to be agglomerated? This is a question that's best asked in a place that's in the southernmost periphery of Horowhenua and the Horizons region, and the northernmost periphery of the Kapiti Coast in the Greater Wellington region. Otaki Township, with its population of 5,500, is the ideal place to ask this question. Having said that, I would like to congratulate Friend Wow for this. She has forced small communities like Otaki to face up to this question. In the last 5 years, I've noted her frustration with the slowness of the region's mayors to forge a series of reforms to create a range of shared services, to increase efficiencies and reduce costs. But just because it's been slow does not mean it cannot be accelerated or that it cannot work. And the only alternative is, in inverted commas, forced amalgamation. Is there an urgency? I quote from page 5 of the Local Government Commission's draft proposal for reorganization of local government in Wellington. I quote, on balance, the case for change in Wellington is not as compelling as it was in Auckland. Wellington does not face the growth pressure of Auckland, nor does it have a level of dysfunction between current councils that was evident in Auckland prior to amalgamation. None of the current councils is in a situation of immediate crisis or at risk of short-term failure. This quote is mentioned twice in the report. But the political point to note is that while it is true that Wellington does not face the growth pressure of Auckland, those who believe Wellington needs to be agglomerated want to create this growth pressure. For that to happen, Wellington City and its CBD needs to grow its ability to attract investment, develop top-class urban amenities, create high-paying jobs and increase its urban population. And to make that happen, the agglomerators, if I can call them that, see the need to increase the rating base from 9 separate and small baskets into one large basket and a centralized command system to prioritize its spending on strategic projects to increase the agglomeration of Wellington's urban center. Just as Auckland is the black hole sucking up capital and human resources nationally, Wellington will be a mini black hole doing the same thing on a smaller scale. As with the Assyrian, Roman and British empires, the surplus capital moves from the periphery to the center. All roads did lead to Rome, and all those roads carried tributes to the central coffers for the aggrandization of Rome. What confidence can we have that Wellington's priorities, post-amalgamation, will be Otaki's priorities when Paraparaumu's priorities have not been Otaki's priorities. Let me give you one example. An 8 million water storage project, which was supposed to be built up on your plateau here, was deferred. Why? Because the capital was needed for the Aqua Center and the civic buildings in Paraparaumu. If you feel currently that Otaki is already alienated from Paraparaumu, the urban and political center of the Kapiti Coast, imagine what it would be like if the center of decision making is shifted to Wellington. So you are perfectly entitled to ask the question, what's in it for us in Otaki? Otaki, which is different from the rest of Kapiti and much of Wellington. Because you look north for your medical services, north for your police-related services, and a local EV that has strong links to the north. If there's one thing that the agglomeration of Wellington Central can benefit Otaki, it is if there is cheap, regular public transport between Otaki and Wellington, but don't hold your breath. I don't deny that Wellington region, Kapiti Coast and Otaki face global challenges. I do not oppose the idea that change is needed, but I'm skeptical that political amalgamation is the only way to meet those challenges. In a recent briefing on the economic development of Kapiti and the region by Burl Consultants Chief Economist Dr. Ganesh Nana, I asked him about the need for political amalgamation to stimulate economic development. I prefaced this with an observation about the growth of the city-state of Singapore and the agglomeration effects on both its Muslim neighbors, Malaysia and Indonesia. The trans-border economic impact on those neighboring countries has been significant despite their political boundaries. His response was simple. He said he was skeptical about the overemphasis on amalgamation as a means to increasing economic performance. I think the political heart had tended to skewer informed debate. We have learned that there have been errors in the consultants' estimates, and the transition cost for the total amalgamation of the region had gone up from 184 million to 210 million. In Auckland, the IT cost for integration jumped from a pre-amalgamation estimate of 100 million to 170 million. Worse, the Advertising Standards Authority has recently upheld a complaint from Lower Hutt. The Greater Wellington Regional Council's editorial on amalgamation was misleading and was likely to exploit the lack of knowledge of the reader. One may call it legal nitpicking, but the lasting political impression is that we have been herded like cattle towards an ideological solution. I repeat my belief that given the global challenges, there is a need for reform, but I'm not convinced that we need total political amalgamation to achieve the economic progress. A $210 million transition cost for $30 million a year savings is, some say, is a dubious case for change. I think the issue is important enough for a poll of the whole region. Thank you.
Kia ora, Guru. Thank you very much. Guru was alluding to the fact that Wellington appears to be a long way away from Otaki. My solution is that it be the Otaki Greater Council that would solve the problems, and we'll have the administration centre here in Otaki because it's a great place to be and a great place to have administration. Yeah, Frank's smiling, so that's going to be good sign.
He didn't ask if he could move here.
Well, kia ora tātou. Thank you very much for coming tonight, and I just want to thank Ian and the team that organised the meeting. This is fantastic, having this meeting. I have to say that I start with Guru. We don't want to be an Auckland-style super city. We're not like Auckland. We're 1/3 of the size, less than 1/3 of the size actually. We have our own values. We have our own way of doing things. Wellington is very different from Auckland. And I actually loathe the term super city. It's not certainly something I never use it. It's not a term that we should be using because it's not what we're talking about. And we're really now talking about the future. We're talking about, will our kids or our grandchildren or our great-grandchildren be able to stay in our region? Right now there's a big magnet and actually Guru's right, there's a big sucking sound from the whole of New Zealand, and that's called Auckland. And it's taking not just resources, taking people as well. In fact, it's not just taking people, it's taking the new people that are coming to our country. So we're not even getting new migrants into Wellington anymore. So from my point of view, this is not like being like Auckland. It's actually how do we manage ourselves better for 20, 30 years' time in the future. And actually, I was really quite pleased because the Local Government Commission actually said that in their report. This is the report. Some of you may have read it. This is one volume, there's 3 other volumes, and that's the kind of main volume. There's also 2, it's right, go there. There's also 2 additional volumes of research, and there's one, a skinnier one, which has got a summary. But if you look at what the Local Government Commission said, they're saying, why are we doing this? They've put out this pamphlet which you might already have seen, and I just want to draw your attention to it. The significant challenges coming up for Wellington councils are regional rather than local and require a regional response. And the current council structure makes it difficult to achieve coordinated responses. And they say the region is connected by strong economic and cultural factors such as patterns of work, travel, spending, recreation and settlement. We all know that. I bet a lot of you had your working life in Wellington and now you've come up to here to retire. And that's of course what happens. People go to the Kapiti Coast or they might go to Wairarapa to retire, but actually we have very strong linkages throughout our region. So what they talked about then was the challenges in the future, which are things like preparing for natural hazards and storms, replacing ageing infrastructure, and enhancing cultural and recreation facilities for residents. There's a whole list of them, and the report is full of those issues. So for me, it's about how can we do that better while still preserving, and in fact, in some cases, I would think it'll be enhancing the local decision-making power, the ability of communities to make their own decisions. Let's just have a listen, shall we? To make their decisions and not have to be tied up with those big issues of funding, debt and funding infrastructure. So I just want to read you again a little bit from the report itself, because I think this is where it comes in for Kapiti. So one of the big issues that they talked about was debt. And they say for districts such as Kapiti Coast, which is forecast to grow, and it is, you might actually have an increase of 50%, of nearly 50% on your population when Transmission Gully is completed, which will only be a few years' time. We're actually putting 20,000 extra residents in our planning, in our plans for transport growth. It's going to be quite big here. This is a growth area. And they're saying where there is already a high level of debt in relation to its income, a significant proportion of the wastewater network reaching its end of the life, the future will be challenging indeed. And they actually point out that for Kapiti, they say Kapiti Coast and Masterton are amongst New Zealand's councils with the highest debt ratios, and once the value of income earning assets is considered, it becomes clear the council that is most challenged by the scale of its borrowings is Kapiti Coast, with just 10% of the population that's got 29% of the net council debt. That's really important for people on fixed incomes, because people on fixed incomes are often on, the fixed income is national super, and you don't have much spare money if you've got to pay a lot of extra rates. So the proposal here, and I want to just run through it quickly and then we'll have some questions, is to have a single council which is made up of 2 components. So it has local boards, and I'll talk about them in a minute, and if you've got this bit of paper it tells you about this, and it also has a governing body. Now just briefly, the governing body will be 21 councillors elected by these, the same areas as elect the local boards, largely corresponding to the current local boundaries. The local boards are the interesting part. So they're suggesting that the Kapiti Coast board will be split into 3 wards: Otaki, Waikanai, Paparama, Pakakuri, Raumati. And in addition, they've suggested that there will be 2 appointed to each board from amongst the members of the governing body. Personally, I don't think that's a great idea, because I think the boards have to be more independent. You have, in Kapiti, you actually have a number of community boards. And the law currently, the Local Government Act, actually provides for what is called local committees. It actually provides for community boards and for local committees. And so if your council or your board wanted to, they could set up these local committees in place of the current community boards. So you wouldn't lose any of that. They're also able to be delegated functions exactly the same. The committees and the community boards are the same under the law. So then the big issue has been the questions of powers and what would the local boards be able to do. And the Commission actually spent a lot of time and effort in their report talking about this. If anybody can get hold of the report, it's online, and have a look at it. There's some very interesting parts of the report. They say they point out that they cannot, it will be in their final proposal that they'll actually make the recommendation. So the process is, this is their draft proposal, they're asking for input, then they make a final proposal. But to give people an idea of what they thought should happen, they've given a long list of powers and accountabilities that the board should do. So there's been quite a big lot of discussion around the region about, oh, they're big toothless tigers, they won't have any power, yada yada. You know, when Auckland was set up, that was the case. Auckland was set up by a transition agency that didn't involve any of the local government people up in Auckland. They were consulted, but they weren't sitting around the table. And they made some big mistakes when they set up their local boards. They have learned from that, and the government has learned from that. The government has actually changed the law since then, the Local Government Act, and the Commission has learned from it. And they are very strong in their report on that. They say, and I can read you out the bit if we want, taking into account what happened in Auckland, taking into account the law, and in particular, they say, taking into account the Commission's view that decisions should be made as locally as possible, we are pushing as much as we can down to the local boards. And we can talk about what that would mean under questions perhaps. The process for making that happen is that after there is a final proposal, there will be a referendum. Everybody agrees there should be a referendum, and if the people vote for the proposal, then there will be a transition board which involves all the councils of the region, and they will work with the Commission to do the final detail. So there's quite a long way to go yet, and there's actually quite a long bit of debate to go on the detail of the issues. But this Commission has been very keen to say, just keep regional the things that are regional. So the things that are regional now are public transport, obviously not local roads, they're done locally, and some of the councils are finding that quite a big impost, and in the future it's going to get worse. The three waters are done locally, except in the Wellington region where the Regional Council does the main water catchment, the big supply. But here it's all done locally. So you guys are paying through your rates for all of that big infrastructure. That would be funded regionally and decided regionally, and most of the things, frankly, that the councils do now would actually stay with the local board. So, look, I don't want to talk anymore. I want to answer some questions because I know you'll all have specific questions. So maybe I stop now and we can do questions?
Yep.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I know it's crackling a bit. If we could, as I said before, if we could be respectful with our questions, I know we're very passionate about some of the issues here. If you could direct your questions to either or to both of our speakers, and I'm sure they'll speak to it. My lovely assistant Carol here will put a timer on it, and Annie will run the microphone to you. Can we start with a question from somewhere, please? Sam?
Oh, okay. Okay, this this one's for Fran. If you're looking at amalgamating councils, why is it, if it's going to be a long process, why is it trying to be ran through to the 2016 local body elections? Would it be more appropriate to look at the 2019 local body elections as a start, so we don't, we don't get all the kinks and things of Auckland?
I'll try this one. How's that? Is that all right? Okay, look, good question. The timetable's not ours, it's the government's and it's the local government commissions. But just the second part of your question, I don't think we will get all the kinks of Auckland. There's been a huge amount of knowledge gathered from Auckland, and they keep retrofitting theirs. They've retrofitted quite a lot and made a few changes, and all of that is picked up in this report. So, you know, the issue probably is that it's not until you get a decision to do it that you can actually sit down and do a lot of the fine detail, and the fine detail is really important. But the big picture stuff needs to be decided first. Do we want to have be together as a region and face those regional challenges together, or do we want to just let all of the TAs just kind of hang in and do what they can with their infrastructure, their debt, all of those other things? And you know, to me, it's a no-brainer.
Any other questions?
I understand, you know, the bad feeling in Auckland is now extended to Waiheke Island and Rodney trying to opt out of the Supercity. And, you know, although you paint a picture of this model being better, I'm concerned about finances and power and control. It's fine to say that boards will have decision making, but they don't have the revenue. Yeah. So basically we need revenue sharing at every level.
Okay, I understand that concern. The model of the proposal is, and the law actually specifies this, that there will be one lot of rates collected. So instead of paying two rates that you pay now, you pay one. That will go to the council. The council is just one organisation, so there'll be the same staff who are doing their jobs now will continue to do it, and they will be working for both the governing body, the regional level body, and the local boards. The rates will go into the council. The law actually is quite specific about this, and we were quite worried about that issue too, because people kept saying, oh, they'll withhold funding from the boards. And again, we wanted to know what would happen here, not what may have happened in Auckland previously. So we had a legal opinion. We got separate. We said to the lawyers, tell us actually what would happen. And they said anything that's provided for in the law that the local boards have to do has to be funded, can't be unilaterally unfunded by the council or the governing board. Anything that the commission decides in the final proposal and puts into its final, it's called a determination, must be funded, because the determination is put into law by an order in council, and you know what that is. An order in council actually creates a law, effectively, and so that will be in the law. There is a third tranche of funding that will be will follow the functions of the local boards that will be agreed in a negotiation between the boards and the governing body, the whole council. In other words, everybody will be looking at all of the budgets and saying, you know, all of the boards will be looking at everyone else's too, I'm sure, and that will be negotiable. We're actually saying in our submission to the Local Government Commission that we think there needs to be a kind of a fourth pool, if you want, which is a discretionary fund that the boards can use how they like. The boards are going to have quite wide powers. They'll have grant-giving powers in their community, by the way. So a lot of the stuff that happens now will just still happen locally. And the key thing, in answer to your question, is that there will be no ability unilaterally to remove funding. The funding follows the function under the law, and that is absolutely written into the Local Government Act, and also now to do with the how the Commission functions in terms of their order in council for the final determination. So I don't share your concern. There is always a tussle, I have to say, about funding, even within the current council districts. Some areas want this money to do that, others want other money to do that. You yourself, Guru said the water storage wasn't built because the money was needed for something else. Yeah, Yeah, so under this model, the water storage would not have to be funded locally, it would be funded regionally, because it would be a regional responsibility, and there would just be a look at what the priorities were, and I would have thought Kapiti, with its fairly high growth projections, would be a rather significant priority for basic infrastructure like water. So that's how it will work. Does that answer you or not?
Not quite. Not quite. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Deidre, I'll just keep
sorry.
I was thinking about the council-controlled organisations too. I mean, that's
I'd
where
like to have a talk about that. Yeah,
it's just awful. For
totally.
Waiheke.
Yep. In Auckland, the good old transition agency put, and I don't know what the number is, it might be 70% or something ridiculous, more than half, I think, of, I don't know the number of the council's budget, into CCOs. Do you know what a CCO is? Okay, it's a council-controlled organisation, so it's like a commercial company that has a board, a commercial board. And so in Auckland, they run all of the transport, that's called Auckland Transport. They run all of the water, that's called Auckland Water, is it? Water Care, thank you. They run, they've got ATEED, which is the Events and Economic Development Agency, which is what somebody, Guru just said they've sent their ambassador to. It was actually ATEED that sent the person to London, not the Auckland Council. I imagine the council might not have been very impressed. So they run all of these, there are all of these CCOs that run all this stuff. In Wellington, up until recently, there hasn't been much appetite for the creation of more CCOs. We thought we ran our bulk water perfectly well, and we would have been very happy to have run the water for the whole region, actually just as one integrated water management body within the regional council. We ran it at arm's length. They had their own report. They had their own funding. They didn't, we didn't crib money from water to anywhere else or vice versa. But it was not a CCO. It was run internally by the council. So we would have been happy to do that, but the other metro councils didn't really want to do that. So what happened? We've created a CCO owned by all of the councils, which is completely antithetical to what people said they wanted before. They didn't want CCOs. And now we've got this farcical situation where Wellington Water is a CCO with a commercial board, but actually, it doesn't make the big decisions about infrastructure funding. So it's kind of it's not quite Mickey Mouse. I won't call it Mickey Mouse. It's an interesting model where they deliver the water for the metropolitan area, but they don't actually pay for the cost of the infrastructure. So. Under the what you've got to ask, what would be the counterfactual to what we're doing? So another proposal some of the mayors are suggesting is that we have a CCO for transport. So we create Auckland Transport equivalent in Wellington. Well, that's been a huge issue for Aucklanders. Auckland Transport runs all of the what they call fence to fence, all of the real estate, on the public roads and the public bits of the road. And I think they're the biggest property owning group in Auckland actually. And it's just nuts. We don't need to do that. That should be run in-house by the council. So in their report, the Commission, good on them, said we're not recommending CCOs. If a new council wanted to set them up, they could, because there's nothing to stop a council setting up a CCO, but we're not recommending them. And frankly, I would not recommend a Wellington Transport, or actually a continuation of Wellington Water. I would recommend they come right back in-house and they're run by the council. You have to run them efficiently, of course, but not as CCOs. So right now, the Auckland Council is quite frustrated because there's that huge amount of their budget that they don't even control.
I've got Em outside. I'll just meet her at the door.
Oh, kia ora, Guru, kia ora. I'm just wondering if there's an opt-out option, Guru. Given that we are at the northern point of the Wellington region, we're currently Kapiti Coast, but we don't feel like we're Kapiti Coast. We don't get any benefits. We don't have a train. That's an issue. We get thrown a bone every now and then for the sidewalk. Well, it's true, isn't it? So my question is, can we opt out? Who decides if we go into this? Is it Paraparaumu? If Paraparaumu, Waikanae, Paikok, if they vote and we're outvoted, do we automatically go in? Or can we as Otaki go back to Horowhenua?
No, no.
Is there an option for us?
They're going to go broke. You don't want to go there.
That's a very interesting question, but a question that has been traversed before. The moment you want to, let's say you want to opt out and do what? How you want to opt out and become independent? Or you want to join Horowhenua, you know what? The question you need to ask is, does Horowhenua want you? Because the moment you do that, it triggers off a whole earthquake on the northern side. Because they have to redo everything else and put it out to consultation. So the question you need to ask is, if you do that, are you an asset enough for Horowhenua to say, yes, come and join us?
Well, can't we go back to where we were? We're part of Public Coast now, but we're the same as...
Yeah, but you still need to trigger. You are now caught in the process.
Actually, I agree with Guru that if you weren't in Company Coast, you'd be in Horowhenua. And I think that there's some people in Horowhenua would quite like to be in Wellington, actually, because they can see the resource implications, actually. And you are in Company Coast now as in terms of a district. You know, the administrative district is Company Coast. You've got your own personality, your own local identity. That won't change. That's, you know, that will be the same as it ever was, because there was local government amalgamation before, of course, and some of these places were taken into Kapiti. They weren't there before, but the local identity, the community feeling of those places did not change one bit. What they got was the benefit of being part of the bigger unit. And the benefit is actually in the stuff I've been talking about. It's paying for your future infrastructure, it's paying for your future needs. There is going to be significant growth up here, believe me, and you guys are going to have to manage that, and your council will have to manage it. So is it better that you're part of a bigger unit with the resources and the skills and the ability to hire some good people with know-how to do it, or a council that has a smaller rate-paying base with just, you know, particularly with an ageing current population who have to pay for all of those things? So I would seriously suggest to you that of all of the major beneficiaries of this proposal are actually places like Otaki, because you are going to be part of a greater Wellington city that will include the CBD in Wellington.
Will we get the health services from Wellington then?
No, unfortunately, I think you should, but unfortunately the district health board boundaries don't align with local government boundaries. I think it's nuts. I think that the government should do something about that. Neither do, by the way, police boundaries all align. There's a whole lot of misalignment between even amongst central government agencies and between central government and local government. So that is not the issue. It probably is an issue we could better address if we did have a bigger unit in Wellington, because... Yes. Well, I thought people might ask about transport, so I'm happy to tell you about where we're going with that. So we've just spent a lot of money on electrifying the rail to Waikanae, as you know, and double tracking, and it was a pretty major input, and it's showing the results now. We're getting huge increases in people on the trains. Question is where we go next. So for this line, we've got the capital connection, and I think I've got an appointment coming up with Simon Bridges sometime. I don't know when it is, to talk about that with Horizons. But our feeling right now is, and we've looked at this, it would not be financially useful to actually keep on electrifying the line further. That if we're going further than Waikanae, the new Matangi trains would get some diesel Matangis built, and then we'd be in a position to go as far as we need to with them. And believe me, Brendan Duffy from Horowhenua would love that, and so would the Palmerston North people. So what we're working on now is trying to look at a business case and see how long it will take, and it will be some years away because the population isn't here yet, but we need to plan for it, where there would be a diesel Matangi service that would just come straight out of Wellington and up as far as it was needed, basically. So they wouldn't be electric trains, but they would be the same as the Matangi electrics. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, but we keep referring to retiring population.
Well,
We'll all be retiring,
yeah.
until the train gets up.
Well, you may be. Don't think you will. I think you're a bit young for that. But you are going to get a whole lot of younger people coming in too when the, Yes, you do. You have younger people here now, a lot. But you actually also have a high proportion of older retirees, and that's just a fact of life because it's such a great place to live. Yeah, absolutely. We understand all that, but guys, we haven't got the money at present to do that, so we're just working on the proposal for it. And we got it as far as Waikanae, which was a lot damn better than we did before. And now the next step would be the diesel trains, and we can take them right up through Otaki. They could go up to Palmerston, in fact, as a passenger train, and they'd be quite nice ones too. Not the capital connection. So that's. I just thought I should tell you that's what we're looking at.
We'll move on to Simone. I've got a question firstly, before I get to you, Marilyn.
Just because you've got the mic.
Just because I've got the microphone, that's right. I can hog it. That's right. There's a question actually for both of you. We have a very strong and an active community board here, and I'd like to acknowledge James Coots, the chair of community board, who's here somewhere hiding, and our great local councillor, Penny Gaylor, who's our Otaki councillor, who's tireless in her advocacy for Otaki. I imagine that under a Greater Wellington Council, we would probably end up with a committee of some sort here in Otaki. How do you see that as being different from the community board that we might have now?
Well, I would see it as not much different, except personally, and this is just a personal opinion, I think the community board should have more delegations. I mean, I've seen around the region people arguing with their council about where the pedestrian crossing should go. And if it just is a local pedestrian crossing, and it's not on a big highway, then I would have thought the local people should make that decision. There's a lot of stuff local people should be deciding that's been aggregated into councils. And so I would say they'd be called local committees, and I just need to tell you how they're formed. They're actually appointed, not elected, but it's perfectly possible that the council could run an election and then just appoint those people. They would have to be, that the delegations would be decided, and they would do that work. So if it were me, I'd be saying, yeah, get on with it, guys. Keep your community boards here. They'll be called local committees. There are some local committees in Wellington now, by the way, in the region, and there are a lot of community boards too. And I'd just say, get on with it, but let's give them some decent delegations so they actually have a job to do and they've got a bit of money to spend.
Marilyn, it's your turn.
Just hang on.
Oh, wait, sorry, Gary.
Yeah, I think, of all the local boards in the district, I think because of the isolation and perceived isolation of Otaki's community board does a sterling job of filling in the gap. So you need that representation, and you need a representation that is not dependent on the whims and the patronage of a local board. And what about the funding of it? I don't know. I mean, these are unknowns. And we talk about having a transition committee which will decide the portioning of the democratic rights and the funding that goes with the democratic rights. How well do we trust these forces when the forces in place are for centralization? The forces in place are for centralization. Get this into your heads. And there are benefits to the centralization in some areas, but there are also minuses, and local representation will suffer. But is that a price you want to pay for other benefits, which friend is, sort of visioned in front of you with a bit of marijuana?
Roll up, Guru, roll up.
I can truly say I've never even tried to inhale. Hey, look, I actually, that's the problem, says Fred. Thanks, Fred. Look, I totally disagree with Guru. Was it Fred that said that's the problem? Who was it? Was it you? Sorry, no. Someone. Anyway, look, I actually think this is the time when when the locals can actually really have a say. And you know what? Your community board is entirely dependent on Kapiti District Council now for its delegations. It's entirely within the gift of the Kapiti District Council. So that will be no different. But I would have thought that if the mayors around the region are really keen on localness, and so am I, that we would come to some kind of agreement about let's have community boards, local committees, let's decide that they can have some good delegations and let them get on with it. And the funding would have to follow. They can't be told to do something and be starved of the money. So I truly think that that is scaremongering. I'm sorry, whether you're on marijuana or not, I think it's scaremongering.
Kia ora, Fran. I'm just wondering, we're talking about all this funding and stuff, and how's that going to affect the ratepayers in the Otaki area or the Kapiti area? I believe we're the only area in this district that has rates on land value and everybody else is capital value. Are we going to have to come up to the rest of the region?
What you're going to have to do is, if it goes through, is change the system and it will be capital value based. So people who are living here that have a, let me get this right, a high valued house, like a really, really, really good house on a low valued property, will actually pay more rates. Absolutely, and I've been quite honest in Kapiti about saying that. It could be the opposite if you've got a beachfront property with a really old batch on it that doesn't have any value at all. You might find it's completely different because it'll be on capital value. So the amount of money coming out of the district may stay the same, but it will be changed. And that was one of the big changes in Auckland. Except they had more cities or more districts on non-capital value rating. They had different sorts of rating bases, and they were akin to land value rates, and so they had some of their more expensive suburbs who changed, and they had massive rates increases. But there are a lot of Aucklanders who also had rates decreases, and you never heard about them on the front of the Herald. So there are swings and roundabouts when you change your rating system. Carterton changed, I think it was the last council in the region to change to capital value, and the same thing happened there. So yes, you guys are the last. I think in South Wairarapa there's still some as well. So there would be changes here, and some people will be clobbered. Absolutely, have to be honest about that. But it won't be because the rates take is going up. The same amount of money will be required. It'll be distributed differently.
That's not going to make those people feel any better.
No, it won't make them feel any better. But you know what? I think that this is going to happen in Kapiti anyway. Forget about amalgamation. It's just going through. Most councils are now on capital value, and frankly, I can't see most councils holding out for much longer. Frankly, I think it's probably going to happen anyway.
Yeah, I'm just interested. I'm just interested to know where you sit with things like rates when you've got a family farm with probably 4 or 5 people living in a house, might have 300 acres behind it on a Class 2 road, and probably the nearest most interesting thing is having parsley planted in your botanical garden rather than marijuana. And how you even got here through the narrowest street in New Zealand is actually interesting as well. But I'd like to know if you can remember what I thought I heard yesterday on national radio, where the guest 3 speakers quoted you as saying that sometimes you have to tell a few lies to keep the public happy or in your favour or something to that. Something to that. Do you know about that?
I've just had legal advice today about defamation, so if I were you, I wouldn't say that. Okay? Absolutely, you should say that, sir, because I've seen who you. I don't know your name, but I can find out. So it was completely untrue. Please do not repeat it. It is completely untrue. Okay? So I know you're not a friend of Stephen Franks, I assume, but actually, if you want to listen tomorrow afternoon, you might hear something different. Okay? So no, I don't think you should tell lies. I have been absolutely upfront with with what will happen here. That's why I'm upfront about the rate system in Kapiti, and I'm also upfront about the fact that I don't like all of this proposal, but to me I wouldn't shoot it down because I don't like the whole lot. I think it is the best thing for Wellington, and by the way, I don't have a family farm. Sorry, I wasn't born that side of the tracks. We do have a little property in Wairarapa, by the way, that we go to, and we'll probably retire there eventually. But probably would have got one up here if there'd been a quicker way of getting here. And that will come. As I said, that's going to come.
That's the trade.
Yeah, right, we could. No, that was completely untrue. I have told no lies whatsoever. And everything, I'm happy to answer any question about anything. Okay?
You have to say.
This is for Fran. You're able to tell us about the debt of Masterton and Kapiti Coast. It's high, apparently. What about Wellington debt? I've heard that's very high.
Wellington debt is high on if you say it's X in dollar values, but Wellington is 4 times the size of most of the other councils. So if you go onto a per capita basis, it's much lower. And that's really important. There's 2 other things that are important here too. Wellington has got a large CBD, and it's really the CBD of the region. It's where most of our commuters go in there each day to work. There's actually quite a few who go around to other places too, but the majority of them go into Wellington City. And the Wellington City CBD pays a significant differential, and because they are higher valued properties, if you've got a big building and it's capital rated and you've got 20 stories, you're going to pay a lot of rates. So their rating base is very large compared with the rest of the region. So when you spread it around like that, that makes a big difference. The other issue for Wellington is they own investments that are earning money. So they've got the airport, they get a return from the airport. In my day, I think they still have leasehold, they were called Glasgow leases in the central city, leasehold property. So they actually have the ability to earn money other than rates. So when a council looks at its debt, it should look at its whole income earning capacity, as you would do. Can we afford that mortgage with our income? So in Wellington City, the income is massive compared with the rest of the region. And it's really interesting because I've been talking with property people in Wellington who were initially quite reluctant about this proposal because they said, we're just going to be paying for the rest of the region. Our rates are just going to go out straight out of Wellington and they'll go to Otaki or they'll go to, Greytown. And I said, well, you have to think about what you get from the rest of the region. You've got to think about the fact that most of your workers live in other places and they come in and they use the train or the bus and they come into town. You've got to think about the retail spend that you get out of them and of what they do for the city. If you didn't have the rest of the region, you wouldn't have a business probably. So then they started to say, yeah, you're right, and kind of, we hang together or we hang separately. And although they know they will be the biggest ratepayers in the new region, as they are in Wellington City, most of them, for the most part, are actually in favour of this because they understand the dynamics of the region. So that's why I'm really keen on getting that big infrastructure put regionally, because I think we could make some progress on it, actually. That's really what's driving me about this. Does that make sense?
Fran, based on the Auckland model, what extra staff would be required and at what cost?
Oh, okay. Well, I know there's been a lot of mythology around about Auckland, and I just got the latest figures from them the other day, and it's something like 600 EFTs fewer than they had. 6-3. What did I say the other day, Nigel? Whatever. It's several hundred fewer than they had on day one. They have actually, I've got something on my iPhone I can have a look at and tell you in a minute actually. They have made considerable savings. They have been able to make savings. Even Auckland Transport made savings by aggregating some of their contracting into procurement. I think it was a couple of $100 million in the first couple of years. So there's significant savings to be made, and they have saved on staff. I've been challenged about how apparently there's a whole lot of people in Auckland earning more than $100,000 now who work for Auckland Council, which is a lot of money. And I just looked at that and thought, okay, so they're running a third of New Zealand. The Auckland market is just going ballistic. You wouldn't want to live there at the moment. You couldn't afford to buy a house probably. And that's what's happening in Auckland. Salaries, house prices, everything is so much higher than Wellington. So I personally would see no extra staff. I would like to think there will be some savings. There will certainly be fewer senior managers around, fewer CEOs, fewer general managers, but I would like to think we can make some other savings as well, and maybe we could also create some jobs in other parts of the economy for those people.
I've read a question to answer. Friend, I know you identified the gentleman over there and warned him that you know his face, but I think I'm on safer ground to ask a response from you as regards the Lower Hutt City's complaint to the Advertising Standards Authority and the findings of the authority that your council's advertising was misleading and was likely to exploit the lack of knowledge of the readers. I mean, maybe we need some information.
So what happened was when it's on. When the report came out, people were saying, what does it mean, what does it mean? So we said, okay, we'll do some full-page ads and we'll summarise the report, and we put in things like that, that picture which you've all seen, and we put in a whole lot of other stuff. And Hutt City didn't like some of the things we said. So in this report, the commissioners have talked about the infrastructure deficits in some of the areas, including Kapiti, and I've just read out a bit from that. And we put in a different ad for each area. So we put one in Lower Hutt, one in Upper Hutt, because we talked about what they'd said. So the complaint was, there were actually several complaints. 3 of them weren't upheld, by the way. That was never mentioned publicly. One of them, the ASA got totally wrong because they said we'd quoted from an email that was actually sent after the ad was published, so I didn't quite see how they could have found against us on that. But we did do one thing wrong, and I'm really, really upset that this happened, but there was one sentence in the ad that had inverted commas around it that shouldn't have, and we acknowledged that and said that won't happen again. I personally don't think it changed the meaning of it at all, but what we said was, this is what the Local Government Commission this is their proposal, and this is what will happen. And I thought that was kind of like plain English. And it was shorthand for, if this goes through, this is what the local government have said, commission have said will happen. And they said, no, you had to say expects will happen. And I just thought, well guys, I called that nitpicking, because I actually think it is nitpicking. Nobody who read our ad would have thought this was absolutely going to happen regardless. We made it clear there was going to be a referendum, there would be this, there would be that, here's the process. All of that was in the ad. So personally, I just thought it was nitpicking. ASA are interesting. They actually made a big thing about freedom of political speech and that, but then they kind of judged this as if we'd been advertising a commercial product where they look at every single word. But it was a very good faith exercise to translate as closely as possible into one page 4 volumes of report. And we did the best we could, and frankly, we probably would never do it again now as an ad. What we'll do in future is do what Hutt City and Upper Hutt have done, I haven't got them with me, and put out a letterbox brochure. And they can say what they like in those, and they have said what they like, actually. And so we thought, should we complain? No. Let's not waste money complaining about what the other councils have said. They've wasted money having a go at us. We were found against on some counts, and I still think it was pretty silly, but, you know, a normal person reading it wouldn't have understood. If you'd gone to the ASA and said, what word should we change, and we put out that ad and then we put out the other, and we said to somebody, read them both, they would have got the same impression from both. So that was exactly what happened. We did not lie, we did not intend to deceive. I thought the language was regrettable in the finding, because there was no intent to deceive. We were saying, this is what will happen. If you guys go for this, this is what will happen. And they said, no, it's only what the Commission expects will happen.
Kia ora. Fran, this is you. I'm sorry, Guru, but this is for Fran.
I know, she's the person in the hot seat.
She has got the hot seat. Fran, if this thing goes through, rather on the nuts and bolts side of the financial side of things, when Auckland got amalgamated, the government fronted up with $1 billion to actually facilitate that, is my understanding. So you have, 9 different councils potentially who have very different IT systems and things like that. And I'm just wondering who is going to fund all of that sort of talking to each other? Because if it does happen, people are going to have to talk to each other, and that costs money. I'm not expecting rates to go down if the amalgamation goes ahead, I'm afraid, but I am interested in who is going to actually pay for the damn thing.
Well, just in terms of rates going down, rates never go down. This is not about rates going down. Well, only if you have an amalgamation and you happen to be the winner on the rating formula. So in Auckland, a whole lot of people did have a rates decrease, but the total rates take, I'm talking of the council, generally it doesn't go down, okay? So put that aside, we're not doing this, this is not being done for that reason. It's actually strategic reasons that this is being proposed. I don't know how much money the government put into Auckland. It may not have been $1 billion. That sounds like a lot of money, $1 billion, but I would have been surprised if it was that much. I can find out. And largely, of course, Auckland had to pay for a lot of their costs too. So, what was that?
Well, most of the money came from Auckland anyway.
It did, yeah. So there's a lot of taxpayers there.
But the government put some money in.
Yes, I would hope they'll put a bit of money in, but we will also have to fund some. Now, IT systems are interesting, and I noticed the Commission came out the other day and said, oh, we got that one wrong. Well, actually, who's ever been involved in putting IT systems together in this room? Oh, yeah, right, you know how long is a piece of string? If you're putting an IT systems together, it's always going to cost you a lot of money. And right now in Wellington, in the region, 3 or 4 of the councils are doing that. And it's been a very difficult process, and frankly, I'm not sure how far they're going to get. So, IT is very difficult. The rest of it, yes, there will be some costs, and they've estimated the costs. There will be redundancy costs for those senior managers and the other sorts of things. But they did say in their report that the options that had the most benefit long-term strategically and that saved the most money long-term were the most expensive in the transition. And they were upfront about that. The most expensive in the transition had the best long-term results. So this is what I said at the beginning, this is about the long-term.
So basically, amalgamation is not about saving money.
Not in my book. Amalgamation is, although actually for Auckland they did save money. They had they were looking at across the region, if you put all the councils together, about a 9% rates increase. And when they amalgamated, they've had no more than 4%. And this year I think they're looking at 2.9. So they are actually crunching quite a few efficiencies into it. It is a big machine, it's a third of the country, so don't think about it as being a tiny little council, it's a ginormous council. But they are making some efficiencies, and as I said, I've got some data on my phone because I asked somebody to give me some data, please, I want some numbers, and I put them on my phone so I could look at them. But it's not essentially about saving money, it's actually about getting better decision making, about giving the communities, freeing them up from the big infrastructure cost and decisions and getting on with the local stuff.
Evening everybody. What's democracy? Democracy's you people, not here. Okay, I've just been doing a bit of research for friends writing a book, and I had to read the history of the Ministry of Works, and I'm glad I did. In 1876, the 9 provincial councils were taken out of business. In 1989, the Labor government tried to break the power base of the farmers by reorganising local body. First time since 1876. 3 mistakes. Creating too many political positions and paying the buggers, handing the power to the bureaucracy, and making them unaccountable. So don't let the wool get pulled over your eyes. Say no to the Supercity, because all it's trying to do is concentrate the power in the hands of a few. You won't ever say. Now, I heard our chair here at Waikanae, I went to a meeting down there last week, talking about the growth. She mentioned it here, but it was all about Waikanae last week, not Otaki. Now, with growth, you need water. Where's that water going to come from? Guess what? Otaki River. And guess who'll be paying for it? Okay, The model we've got at the moment is not working properly. We all know that. You know, I heard a talk about the diesel rail cars. Well, I've got to acknowledge Colin Pearce here. He and I have been up to the Horizons Regional Council twice now, saying you've got redundant rail cars sitting in Auckland rotting that they could put on the track tomorrow if we had the political will. But it's quite deliberate. They don't want development here. They want it in Waikato where they get maximum return on their sections. Those hidden developers are having a lot of power and a lot of say. So remember that. No to the Supercity. Okay, my question, one of the things I suggest we can do is establish a bit more democracy with the present model. Okay? 10 minutes left here. We've got Nigel Wilson here, our regional councillor. I can vote for him. I can't vote for Fran. Okay? We should have the opportunity to vote for both. Okay? And one last thing, there's a Facebook page that Sam's put up. It's called Stop the Supercity. Have a listen. Fran's speech and the people of Hutt Valley. Hear the truth.
I just need to talk about some of what Fred said. One of the things that will be done with a bigger regional unit, not a Supercity, is the ability to have what we call spatial planning. And most people's eyes glaze over when you talk about that. But it's actually about making some decisions about where the development should be and where the development shouldn't be, and how the communities, what the communities need. So in Auckland, as part of the Auckland Plan, which is the only spatial plan in New Zealand that's legally mandated, they have created this thing called the Southern Initiative, where they looked at South Auckland, and you know where South Auckland is, the old Manukau city, and they've done a big consultation. They sat down with the community, actually with the government as well. First time they've been involved with the private sector, and they said, what does this community need? What do the kids need here in 10, 20, 30 years time? What infrastructure, what facilities? How do we get it? Who's doing what? And that's what it is. They've done the same for the North Shore in Auckland. It's called something else. We can't do that in Wellington, so I don't know, I couldn't work out who the they were in Fred's speech, whether they who wanted the development of Waikanae were, I don't know who they were.
Who's fronting
I don't know who they were, but right now the district plan is KCDC's, and so wherever they want development or not, that's where it goes. So I'm not sure how they run their, Guru might tell us how they run their consultation with locals. But I will tell you a couple of things. And last night, yes, I was in Hutt. And Hutt Valley has got half of the vacant industrial land in the region. And, you know, that needs to be filled because that's what we call brownfield. So it's got all the infrastructure, it's got the sewage and the water and everything running right past the sections, and they need to fill it. Wellington City has got a proposal for a big new development at what they call Lincolnshire Farms, which is near Granada, across the road from motorway from Tawa. And I just think it's nuts that all of the different councils can actually just do all this stuff. Why would you build a brand new greenfields development when you've got a lot of room in a brownfields area if you want to put industry in and you want to attract industry to the region? There's a lot of land already up here, not talking about the greenfields land, I'm talking about within current industrial and commercial areas. So you'd want to look at how you populate that. So this is one of the benefits of regionality, that you can look at these things on a regional basis, and you can say, what's the population going to be? How's it going to work up here? When do we need to get that diesel train started? What are the facilities that are needed? What's the age of the population going to be in 10 years' time? We need to talk to the government about a new school here, and we need to look at it over the region and do it regionally, because it's really hard to do that thing very locally. It just doesn't work very well.
I was just wondering about having like you say, we're going to have a referendum, and I'm just wondering how that's going to work, because like the government's wanting this to happen and driving it, so is it going to be a binding referendum?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it going to happen?
Oh, yeah. Everybody. everybody wants a referendum, and you get a referendum by getting 10% of the voters, registered voters in any one area to sign up. So the smallest areas, Carterton, and they'll easily get that, and everybody will just help get those voters to sign up. There will be a referendum, and it will be binding.
Fran, you did say that there were some things about the proposal that you don't like.
Yep.
Could you just explain that?
Well, I particularly don't like the two councillors from, or whatever they're called, from the governing body on each of the local boards. I just think that is not good for the local community's decision making. And who will they be representing? I mean, will they be having a regional perspective or a local perspective? I think you should keep those layers separate. I think the same with community boards, actually. I don't approve of district councils being on community boards. I think they should just be for the locals, the community boards. So that's one area I don't like. I thought they're thinking about the Māori representation. I couldn't quite work out where they were coming from, frankly. And we've said to them in our draft submission, which we haven't passed yet, it's going to the council tomorrow, look, please can you go back and talk to the regional iwi and, you know, be a bit more specific. We have a regional partnership model called Otaki, which is the iwi leaders of the region, and we actually and we work with them, but it's a partnership, it's not a committee of the council. So we're not funded by us or anything like that. I noticed that Lower Hutt in their ad, actually one of Ray's columns and in an ad, they said something like a Māori committee reviewing decisions, which I thought was slightly racist, frankly, because they're trying to say, well, look, the Māoris will be running the place. Well, actually, the Māori, they haven't been clear in what they want for, but they certainly didn't say that. They just said something along the lines of what the regional council has now. So we've just said you need a bit more clarity on that. We also said there were some mistakes in here, they need to fix the mistakes. But we don't think that has actually changed the import of, you know, the strength of the case.
I have a different view from Fran in terms of the appointing back of councillors to local boards or here the community boards. It has worked well with our community boards, that the councillors are actually become more accountable to the local community because they face the elected representatives of the local board. So you need them to, they listen to the board and take it back to the council table as an advocacy role. And similarly, some of the issues that come up in council, they are able to communicate this back to the grassroots. And I think this is a very important function. And you can note from Fran Wau's perception, you could say that if you want more centralization, then you keep this sort of avenue separate.
That's not why I'm saying it.
Well, I say it could. And I leave it to the public to see whether that would be more. That's true. And more localization is good. And that's one. The other issue I want to raise is, it's all well and good to talk about the transport issues for Otaki in terms of what a future amalgamated council can do for Otaki, when right now you don't have to have a diesel unit going from here to Wellington. All you need is a diesel unit going up and down from Waikanae to here. This issue was put to Paul Swain, who is the leader for the transport portfolio in the regional council. He has yet to give an answer. He said, they came to council and said, look, a diesel unit is a potential answer rather than the cost of electrifying to Otaki. But having said that, no work has been done to underpin that perception or that desire to have that service done. No work has been done, and that's the test. If we are trustful in the small things, then we can trust you in the big things. So this is a small step. But I suppose it comes down to economies of scale. And when you have a small population like Otaki, you are not a priority. Hello?
question out here.
I think this perhaps harkens back to the American Revolution, where I think it was something that went along the lines that no taxation without representation. And I see, I think if I've heard correctly, that this document is proposing that we leave it in the hands of a council, if you like, to decide whether or not they will give us representation at a local level. And I, for one, would heartily support that we don't vote for this until those sorts of points are sorted out to start with. And we shouldn't be asked, I think, to vote on a proposal for amalgamation until that is enshrined really in the document right at the start. So that would be my first point.
Can I answer that first and then you get on to the other one?
I might forget my second point.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, you're not old enough.
See, I've forgotten already.
Old age, Roger.
The second point that I would query was, seeing I've lived in Otaki for 40 odd years, and we go back to the stage where we had our own council here, and that was a little town council, sure, but I noticed that most of our roads were tar sealed, the lights still went on at 6 o'clock at night, the library was there, the council chambers was there, the pool was built, the tennis courts went in, the parks were mowed, etc., etc. And we had a sewage system, of course, and we were lucky enough to have water to the door. And we've been amalgamated into Kapiti for a number of years now, and despite a rather horrific increase, I think, in rates, I don't think we've seen a commensurate increase in services provided from Kapiti. And I, for one, have watched my rates escalate something terrible, and I would hate to be somebody on a fixed income, because I don't know how they would do it. The promise, of course, have I gone past my 2 minutes so I can stop? Yeah. So I've always wondered about businesses that have to live within their means, and they can't necessarily charge on the extra percentages that pay, their staff or something. The market will not let them do it. Councils seem to be in this wonderful position where they do a plan and then they say we need to put the rates up by 7% to cover the plan, and we also need to increase our staff wages and our increases and so on. And we, the local taxpayers, don't seem to actually get much of a say within this. And I just wonder if I could just ask you, Fran and Guru, if you'd like to comment on this, how can we get to a state where any of our councils can actually live within their budgets?
I can't talk on behalf of KCGC. I'll hand over to Guru on that.
Sorry, Fran. Or actually live within the cost of living, or like the inflation rate of 1.8%.
Like you just heard Fran Wiles say, the amalgamation exercise is not about reducing rates.
No, rates will never go down.
The total rates will never go down.
Rates will never go down. How it's distributed might change.
Okay, so that's your point, and it applies equally to the KCDC situation.
Guru, I would suggest that you'd be very popular if you come up with a mechanism that will do that.
Well, I think no politician can come up with something like that.
Open the book. They can just before elections, though.
Is that what the regional council does?
No.
Really?
So look, I'm sorry, I've just lost. I think you got your answer from Guru, but I would say that your big challenges here are the big infrastructure challenges, and it is important for the whole region that all our communities, doesn't matter what size, have good infrastructure, water, sewage, etc. You can't hear.
Otaki's big infrastructure.
I'm just saying generally, whatever you need. I'm not going to pass judgment on that, sorry. I'm just saying generally the idea is the infrastructure is done regionally, and that means that when something comes up, look, I don't know what your plan will be in 20 years' time and how much population you'll have here. I'd like to think there was still some wonderful, green space, that it wasn't all built all over. But if there are more population coming, then there will be other needs. So, and that will happen, even the local roads. Your first part of your question, that is the law that we have now. So the law says you can have local community boards or you can have local committees. Choose what you like, but the council decides what they do. That is no different from what it is now. It's exactly what happens now. And I know you've got you've got a number of community boards, your communities have their own boards and so on. They're brilliant, actually, most of them work very well, but I hear the occasional niggle about delegations and that sort of thing. And that's no different, and it's exactly the same. That situation just stays. It's nothing to do with the amalgamation. The amalgamation proposal is about the district council and the regional council. So we would all go out of business and there would be one council to replace them with those two different areas of representation. So saying no taxation without representation is completely irrelevant to this. You will have representation. You will have 9 people on your local board, and you will have 2 people on the region-wide body. And as your population grows here, those seats will be adjusted because they follow population growth. So the places that are losing population later on, and I'm talking about in years to come, as always happens when there's a redivision of electoral boundaries, will probably lose some, one person and you will gain. Now, if this is the big growth area, this in Wellington City, that's where the growth will be. So I can't quite understand the no taxation without representation. You'll have a board of 9 people, which is quite a decent size, and you'll have 2 people on the other one. And then the availability of local committees if they want to, so an Otaki, a Pakakariki, a Raumeri, whatever they want.
We are getting close to 8 o'clock, and I know that some people will want to move on. Marilyn and one next to you, last 2 please. And I urge everybody just to have an opportunity afterwards to mingle with others. Nigel Wilson, I need to acknowledge, Nigel is here from, he's the Company Councillor for Wellington Regional Council, so have a chat to him if he's got time. I know you turned up early today, Nigel, so thank you. We can only really have 2 more, so if I can hand it on to Marilyn and next year.
Thank you. She's been asking.
Well, welcome to your meeting, Ian. That's how you advertised it.
You've been at 5 of my meetings, I think, so far, and I really want to hear from the locals today, not at all.
This is Penny Bright, ladies and gentlemen. Have a chat to her afterwards. There's the example of a bully at work. Freedom of speech.
Oh, shut up, Fred.
No, that's what it's about. You've got to stop bullying.
Okay, thanks, Fran. I'm just a bit concerned that the 2 representatives we're talking about for our Otaki area here at the moment are going to be doing the same work as the 4 representatives that we have now, because we have 4 community board members and they all represent this area. And I've got 2 points actually. The water meters that are here at the moment, the Kapiti Coast District Council, when they installed those, promised the people they would not be privatised. Will the new council promise that as well, or are they going to do their own rules?
I'm absolutely sure they will. There's no appetite for water. In fact, you're not even allowed to privatise right now. It's against the law, and nobody I know in local government wants to do that anywhere. There's a it's a non-issue. Just in terms of your representation, did you say you have 4 community board people? Why? So if the council wants to keep having a community board, which would be called a local committee, why wouldn't it be the same?
Will there be funding for those 4 people on the community board?
No, if they set up a local committee, which is the equivalent of the community board, yes, they have to fund it. So my view, as I said earlier, I'd say it again, is they should get more to do. I think as much as you can gets pushed down. If it's not regional, it should be decided as near as possible to the population that it affects. So I don't know all the details of what your community board does, but why wouldn't you just have a group doing the same stuff? But no, it's not mandatory, and it's not mandatory anywhere. That's the thing, is what I'm saying. Right now, community boards are not mandatory. But why would you not have community boards in this district, which has such a strong history of community boards? Why would that change? You probably get the same people elected to this, you know, I mean, that's what's happened in Auckland. A lot of the same people are there. Why would they change their minds? I don't understand that concern, because this is a really strong community board area here. And I would have thought you'd just have your local committees like you've got now.
One more question from the back.
Yes, my name's Malcolm. I live in River Crescent, Otaki. I've just come to the final part of this proposal. What happens next? What concerns me is it says that if you get 10% of people want it, then you can go ahead to get this final vote. But the final vote says the vote would be held across the whole region and would be binding. That means that even if everyone in Otaki voted, they'd be outvoted by the rest of them, would be outvoted by the rest of them. So isn't that form, what's the point of it? Why are we, when we get that far, we're going to get voted out anyway?
Well, it depends whether you agree with it or not. Some people might actually agree with it from your district.
Yeah, well, can I direct this to Guru? Would you give your comments on that one, Guru, please?
Right. Well, that's why you should say no now. You got votes. You just add, and don't think that your position, that Otaki says, no, we don't want it, we want status quo, it's not shared by lower heart or upper heart.
No.
You know, don't think that you're alone.
All the wire wrap up.
No.
All the wire wrap up. So it's a risk for both sides. It's a double-edged sword. But it needs to go to a poll, original poll. And there would be another round of campaigning, if you like, by the two sides. So which is good for democracy.
Right. Thanks, Guru.
Right.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you. I'm sorry we don't have time for more questions, but as I say, mingle with the people that you've got here. Penny Gaylor at the back there, our local councillor. James Coots is in the middle here. I found him now. Thanks, James. And Nigel Wilson, of course. I'm not sure how long Fran will be able to stick around. And we have another count. Oh, yes, Colin Pearce from the Community Board. Great to see you all here. And Guru, I'm sure, given that he's now a local, will stick around for a little bit. The bar is open, so if you'd like to have a beer. Any final comments from either of you?
Well, I've got a comment.
One for Guru?
I can't understand that if you uphold democracy and if you want to manakitanga, if you like, I mean, a person from Auckland is here and she's not been given a chance to ask a question.
Yeah.
I mean, she may have asked a lot of questions in all the other areas that you've spoken. I understand she's been hounding you. I'd like to see her hound you here in Otaki.
Okay, well, we're going to close the meeting now. Thank you all for coming. And yeah, just ask questions of the people who are here. Penny Bright is here, as you can see. If you want to ask some questions of her, I'm sure she'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.